It was just after midnight when the coast went quiet. The winds had stilled, the waves softened, and the stars vanished behind a thick ceiling of fog. From the watchtowers, nothing looked unusual. Another cargo vessel drifting near British waters, moving without urgency. No distress call, no alarm, just silence. But the ship's path was strange. Its route didn't match any registered shipping lanes. And something about the way it lingered, hovering just outside the perimeter of coastal patrol, triggered a quiet alert. A message sent to one desk, then another, then another. Within minutes, eyes across multiple agencies were watching the same grainy signal. Some thought it was a fishing vessel. Others suspected it might be a ghost ship, abandoned and drifting. But no one expected what would come next. For men stood on that vessel. Calm, composed, almost too calm. They knew what was hidden below their feet, and they knew exactly how much it was worth. 100 million pounds. In vacuum-sealed bricks. Packed tight into a hidden compartment, buried beneath steel and salt water. They believed they were invisible. They believed they had timed everything perfectly. The route, the tides, the handoffs. Every mile of that journey was measured and calculated. But what they didn't see was the unmarked patrol boat cutting toward them in the dark. What they didn't hear was the click of headsets going live as elite officers were briefed in whispers. And what they couldn't stop was the plan already in motion to take them down. This wasn't just about cocaine. It was about power, territory, control. And the moment the boat was boarded, the illusion shattered. By morning, 4 men were in chains. 1 ship was in custody. And one of the largest drug trafficking operations in UK history had been exposed in the most unexpected way. But how did it get this far? Who were the men who risked everything? And how many others were involved, still out there, still moving product, still watching? This is the story of a drug empire built across oceans, and the night it all collapsed. It began months earlier, far from the English coast, in a city where secrets are currency and silence is survival. Rotterdam, a city known for its sprawling port, the largest in Europe. Ships come and go around the clock. Containers stacked like skyscrapers. Forklifts buzzing. Customs agents scanning thousands of shipments, most of them ordinary. But not all. In the shadows of that steel maze, a deal was struck. For men, each from different backgrounds, different histories, different levels of desperation, bound together by a single mission. Adrian Coles. A 39-year-old with a string of petty thefts behind him and a history of short-term jobs that never lasted. A man who knew every back alley in Essex, every portside road where cargo quietly changed hands. He wasn't flashy. He didn't post online, but people knew his name. He was the quiet connector, the one who made arrangements and disappeared. Malik Hanif, just 31, born in Bradford. A former truck driver with debts that climbed faster than his wages. He'd once driven across Europe with nothing but a burner phone and a cooler full of iced Red Bull. Then one day, he vanished from the transport logs. Reappeared 6 months later, driving luxury cars, wearing tailored jackets, with no visible income. When friends asked what changed, he just smiled. Liam Foster, a former dock worker from Liverpool, fired for fighting, arrested for smuggling. Twice, but never convicted. He understood ports, schedules, the blind spots. He also had access to forged manifests, and he knew how to scrub a serial number clean in under 5 minutes. And finally, the captain, the one who never spoke to anyone directly, known only as Duke and encrypted messages, no known address, no paper trail, no photos, but every movement of that boat was his. Every container checked, every gram of cocaine calculated. He didn't carry a weapon, he didn't need one. People feared him, because they knew, if you crossed him, you vanished. Together, they orchestrated a plan so precise, so quiet, that for nearly a year, they moved product without a trace. Small shipments at first, then larger ones. Eventually, bricks the size of car batteries were moving from the Caribbean to South America, from Antwerp to Rotterdam, and then on to vessels headed for the UK coastline. The operation depended on timing, weather patterns, port schedules, Security shift changes. Every shipment was disguised, buried beneath pallets of fruit, machinery, even children's toys. And they paid off the right people. Port workers, warehouse managers, security guards. Each one offered a cut. Each one given strict orders. Don't ask questions. Don't open containers. Just follow the plan. They were organized, focused, and for a while, untouchable. But there was one thing they didn't account for. One man they never saw coming. Detective Superintendent Neil Cavendish had been chasing ghost routes for 2 years. Disappearances of containers, gaps in shipping logs, inconsistencies no one else cared about. He was quiet, methodical, obsessed. His colleagues called him the accountant because of the way he built evidence, line by line, shipment by shipment. And when a manifest arrived with a weight discrepancy of just 132 kilos, he didn't shrug it off. He flagged it. That shipment was supposed to be filled with ceramic tiles, but it was 132 kilos too heavy. He requested surveillance. Nothing happened. He requested it again. Denied. So he drove to the dock himself. Stood in the rain for 6 hours. Just watching. And that's when he saw it. A man, Liam Foster, meeting with a crew member from a vessel registered in Panama. No handshake. No greeting. Just a silent handoff of a single clipboard. From that moment on, Cavendish didn't sleep. He opened a case. Quietly. Without fanfare. He followed every shipment from that vessel. Tracked every car that left the port. And soon, a pattern began to form. Cavendish reached out to the National Crime Agency. Requested authorization for deeper surveillance. Tapped into overseas customs data. Built a timeline. He was no longer chasing ghosts. He had names, dates, locations, and the clock was ticking because one final shipment was en route. One final boat, headed directly for UK waters. With the largest payload yet, over 100 million pounds in uncut cocaine. For men, one ship, one final run. They believed they were unstoppable. They had no idea the storm was already closing in, and the clock was ticking. Fast. Every move Cavendish made had to be deliberate. One misstep, and the entire network would vanish before he could close in. He knew how these things worked. These weren't street-level dealers who could be rattled by a traffic stop or a midnight knock at the door. These men were methodical, patient, trained to disappear the moment the wind changed. So he built the pressure slowly, like tightening a noose around a phantom's neck. First came the listening devices quietly installed on phones found in abandoned drop sites. Then came the long hours watching CCTV footage from ports in Rotterdam, Felixstowe, and Tilbury. He traced license plates, blurred faces, shipping numbers. 3 months in, he had a map on his wall that looked like something out of a war room. Pins, strings, photos, flight itineraries, burner phone patterns. And at the center of it all, one vessel. The MV Corinthia. Registered to a shell company in the Bahamas. Docked twice a month in Rotterdam. Every 5th docking, it landed in England. And every time it did, something went missing from customs. A pallet. A crate. A shipping seal tampered with just slightly, enough to be overlooked by anyone who wasn't looking for it. But Cavendish was. He brought in a team. 3 investigators handpicked for their silence and their skill. 1 former MI5 analyst. 1 cybercrime specialist. 1 marine logistics officer who knew port schedules better than his own children's birthdays. Together, they watched. Waited. Quietly collected. But pressure doesn't only build on one side. Inside the smuggling network, cracks were forming. Small ones at first. Missed payments. A delay in Antwerp. A warehouse in Essex raided after a noise complaint led local officers to a stash of stolen tools, nothing related to drugs, but enough to make the group twitch. Adrian Coles noticed. He started checking his mirrors more often, leaving phones behind when he met contacts, switching SIM cards twice a day, and he began asking questions too many. He was nervous, and in this business, nerves get you killed. Liam Foster, the muscle of the group, didn't like it. He pulled Coles aside one night outside a shipping yard in Thurrock. Cold air. Diesel smoke hanging in the mist. Foster put a gloved hand on Cole's shoulder and said only 5 words. "You make noise, you drown." Coles didn't ask anything after that. But he did something worse. He got drunk. And when people like Adrian Coles drink, they talk. It was a bartender in Chelmsford who overheard the first clue, a slurred confession about a boat that makes more money in a week than the whole damn town does in a year. She didn't know what it meant, but she remembered the name, Corinthia. She passed it on to a friend. That friend was a police constable. And that name made its way to Cavendish, who already had it circled in red ink. Now Cavendish knew the timeline was shortening. He wasn't the only one closing in. The crew was growing uneasy, paranoid. And paranoia in organized crime is like gasoline on a stove. So he played his hand. Just one card. On the night of June 3rd, Cavendish had an unmarked unit follow a lorry that had left the dockyards without a proper scan. The driver didn't notice. He was high on amphetamines and hadn't slept in 2 days. He stopped at a lay-by on the A13, left the engine running, and walked into the bushes to relieve himself. In those 2 minutes, officers opened the back of the truck. Inside, boxes labeled as mechanical parts. Heavy, wrapped in industrial plastic. Inside those boxes, bricks of compressed powder. 127 kilos. Purity levels above 85%. Street value, nearly 15 million pounds. They didn't arrest the driver. Didn't stop the truck. They closed it. Sealed it. Let it roll on to its destination. Why? Because Cavendish wasn't after the product. He was after the people. He wanted names. Locations. Every thread in the web. For the next 2 weeks, he followed the shipment's path. From the lorry to a warehouse in Romford. From that warehouse to a second location in Chigwell. And finally, to a quiet farmhouse outside Colchester, where an unsuspecting 62-year-old widow unknowingly rented out a barn to a man she only knew as Dean. Dean was actually Malik Hanif. That barn was the final staging ground, where shipments were divided, repackaged, and prepped for street distribution. Cavendish knew they were close. So close. But then, the crew caught wind that someone inside was leaking. They didn't know who, but they suspected. Adrian Coles went missing on June 19th. Last seen leaving a pub in Basildon. His car was found the next morning, still running. Doors open. Wallet on the passenger seat. His phone smashed. No one filed a missing persons report. Because no one dared to. Cavendish had to move. The Corinthia was scheduled to dock again in 3 days. If he didn't intercept that shipment, they might burn the entire operation. Or worse, disappear for good. It was time. The takedown had to be surgical. Coordinated. No leaks. No second chances. He submitted the warrant request. Scheduled coordinated raids across 6 counties. 17 locations. 33 officers. One morning. He picked the date. June 22nd. But someone beat him to it. At 4:41 a.m. on June 21st, a fisherman near Tilbury called emergency services. There was a fire. Something large. Floating. A boat. The Corinthia. Engulfed in flames. From the lorry to a warehouse embarking. An unremarkable building tucked behind a row of distribution centers and recycling plants. No signs. No cameras. A single entrance. Inside, it looked like any other logistics hub, pallets, forklifts, rows of stacked boxes, but buried within that bland disguise was the heart of a criminal empire. Cavendish had seen setups like this before, but this one was different. This one felt military. Patterns were clean. Shifts rotated without overlap. No loose ends, no loitering, no chatter. These weren't street-level pushers. These were men who understood protocols. Which meant someone higher up was giving orders. And Cavendish finally knew who. The name had surfaced months earlier in whispers. Emails routed through servers in Moldova. Bank transfers that stopped in Liechtenstein, rerouted through Panama. And always attached to one name. A ghost. No arrest record. No paper trail. But linked to every shipment Cavendish tracked. Viktor Kroll, former Eastern Bloc intelligence, expelled from Romania in 2002, disappeared into the Balkans for nearly a decade, rumored to have run black market arms during the Kosovo conflict, a legend in the underworld, but never confirmed, never caught, until now, because the barking warehouse had a flaw, a human one. The man on night shift, Tarek Minsa, 47 years old, worked forklift jobs since he was 16, 2 kids, mortgage up to his ears, and a sick mother in Accra who needed surgery, which made him the perfect mark. Cavendish approached him in a petrol station parking lot. No badge, no threats, just one sentence. If your son walks in here one night and one of those crates explodes, how long do you think it'll take for you to forgive yourself? Tarek folded. Quickly. Within days, Cavendish had access to delivery logs, routing sheets, passcodes to the loading bay. But most importantly, he had access to the schedule. And that's when everything accelerated. According to the logs, the next high-value shipment was arriving in exactly 9 days. On board the Corinthia, 17 containers, 2 flagged in red. The final destination, a private airstrip in Cambridgeshire, just past midnight. From there, flown in pieces to Qatar, repackaged, rerouted to Brazil, and then dispersed across Europe again. A perfect laundering loop. It had to end before that loop closed. Cavendish called in the National Crime Agency, Customs, Border Force. He requested blackout orders, restricted airspace clearance, and the deployment of a tactical unit that specialized in maritime seizures. And quietly, behind all of it, he prepared for the hardest part, the takedown at the airstrip. Because Viktor Kroll wasn't just sending his lieutenants anymore. This time, he was coming himself. They spotted him 2 hours before the operation began, disembarking from a chartered jet in Luton, flanked by 2 men who looked like they'd been carved from concrete. No bags, no phones, just a silver case handcuffed to one of them. Within minutes, they were in a black SUV, heading straight for the airstrip. Cavendish's team was already in position. The airfield was rural, hidden behind farmland, accessible only by a single gravel road. No tower, no lights, just a hangar and a strip barely long enough for a G5 to take off. But that's how Kroll liked it. Remote, quiet, control over every variable. At 11:52 p.m., the convoy arrived. The gate opened. No resistance. The SUV rolled inside, followed by a lorry that had been swapped out hours earlier by Cavendish's team. To the naked eye, it looked untouched. Identical seals. Same weight. But the contents had been replaced. One box contained nothing but sand. Another, a tracking beacon. And a third, armed with a tiny camera. Cavendish watched everything in real time from an ops van just outside the perimeter. At 12:07 a.m., Viktor Kroll stepped out. Tall, measured, wearing gloves despite the mild night. He lit a cigarette, checked his watch, and gave a nod. Workers began unloading the lorry. Fast, precise. They were trained. And just as the plane's engine started to whine, Cavendish gave the order. Go. Every light at the airstrip exploded to life. High beams, spotlights, sirens. A wall of black-clad agents stormed the field from every direction. Helicopters above, drones locking onto heat signatures. The roar was immediate, commands shouted in half a dozen languages, men thrown to the ground, guns raised. But Viktor Kroll didn't flinch. He raised both hands slowly, smiled, and dropped to his knees. But it wasn't over, because in the chaos, one of his guards had made it to the hangar. Seconds later, a fireball erupted, engulfing the side of the building. One container detonated. It sent metal shards slicing into the tarmac. Screams, shouts. A second blast followed, but this time, it came from the case Kroll's guard had been carrying. That explosion didn't kill anyone. It released a thick, acrid smoke, enough to blind the infrared systems and scramble the comms. In the confusion, one SUV disappeared off the lot, and Kroll, still on his knees, laughing. It was a message. This was never about escape. This was a test. And Cavendish knew. He hadn't caught the head of the snake. He'd only cut off one of its hands at precisely 12:11 a.m. The second vehicle, disguised as a cargo van but fitted with enough surveillance tech to wiretap a foreign embassy, received the green light from Cavendish. Inside, the tactical team, clad in black, helmet strapped, fingers curled around the triggers of compact submachine guns, awaited only one final confirmation. Victor Kroll had opened the case. Inside, what looked like a satellite modem. But it wasn't. It was a wireless signal scrambler, capable of knocking out every traceable signal within a 3-mile radius. Once he powered it on, all comms would go dark. No GPS, no cell, no drone feed. The entire operation would vanish into static. Cavendish didn't wait. He leaned forward, voice steady in his calm. Execute. Now. And hell descended. Floodlights snapped on. Deafening shouts echoed across the airfield as armored officers breached the gates and swarmed the tarmac. The SUV's driver reached for something under the seat. He never got the chance. A sniper, positioned 800 yards away in the tree line, neutralized the threat before his hand made contact. Victor Kroll didn't flinch. He raised his arms, lips tightening, eyes locked directly on the ops van. He knew. He always knew it would end like this. 3 of his men resisted. 2 went down. 1 tried to run, didn't make it 10 yards. The remaining 6 were restrained and zip-tied in under 90 seconds. The entire airfield was secure by 12:14 a.m. Inside the silver case was enough encrypted documentation to link Kroll to at least 14 other shipments across 6 countries. Printed manifests, burner bank credentials, 2 handwritten ledgers. It was the break Cavendish had chased for nearly 4 years. Victor Kroll was processed at an undisclosed holding facility outside London by 5:30 a.m. No lawyers, no calls, no statements, just silence. For 32 hours, he refused to speak, until Cavendish sat across from him. No handcuffs, no mirror, just 2 chairs, a metal table, and a recorder. Victor leaned back and said only one thing: "You're 3 years too late." And he was right. Because while the Barking warehouse was shut down, while the crates were confiscated, while 53 arrests followed across 4 countries in the days that came after, a pattern began to emerge. One that Cavendish hadn't seen coming. The drugs? Just a layer. The arms ship. Pipeline while British authorities focused on cocaine and handguns. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Because 6 days after his arrest, a second airstrip, this one in Derbyshire, was found completely gutted. No crates. No workers. No aircraft. Just scorch marks on the concrete and a single bullet casing left in the hangar. Someone had cleared it out. Kroll's people weren't loyal, but they were thorough. And then came the recordings. Cavendish received them anonymously. USB drives left at the gate of his residence. No fingerprints. No sender. Each file contained surveillance footage of conversations Cavendish never knew were recorded. Meetings inside Scotland Yard. Calls between MPs. Hushed discussions between senior officers and foreign dignitaries. There had been leaks. From the very beginning, someone inside the investigation had been feeding Kroll's network just enough information to keep them one step ahead. Not enough to derail everything. Just enough to delay. To misdirect. To bleed the clock. The implications were enormous. An internal probe was launched. Over a dozen suspensions. Several resignations. And Cavendish? He was given the option to step away. He refused. He doubled down. Swore he wouldn't rest until every last thread of Kroll's empire was ripped out of the ground. But the cost was already stacking. 3 months after the airfield raid, Cavendish's car was broken into outside his home. Nothing taken. Just the word, "watch," etched into the windshield. 6 months in, an agent who had worked the Barking warehouse infiltration went missing while vacationing in Greece. No signs of struggle. No ransom. Vanished. And Victor Kroll? He was transferred to Belmarsh under maximum security. But once a week, he received a visitor. Always the same woman. Early 40s. No registered identity. Facial recognition returned 0 matches. Each visit lasted exactly 20 minutes. No talking. No notes passed. Just a glance and silence. The man may have been caged, but his reach wasn't. Cavendish knew the case wasn't closed. It was only dormant. The kind of quiet that comes right before thunder. So he stayed ready. Because even after all the arrests, all the seized shipments, all the names and networks pulled into the light, Victor Kroll had said it best. They were 3 years too late. And in the world of crime, 3 years is a lifetime. Somewhere out there, the next chapter had already begun. If this story unsettled you, it should. Because it isn't just about Victor Kroll, or a secret airstrip embarking, or crates filled with ghosts of the missing. It's about how deep corruption can run. How organized crime doesn't wear a mask and move in the shadows. It sits in boardrooms, shakes hands with men in suits, and waits for the right time to disappear before the lights come on. There are thousands of stories like this one. Most never make the news. Some are buried. Others are bought and paid for in silence. And the victims? Their names vanish before anyone ever learns them. But if we stay silent, they win. So if you've watched this far, do more than just watch. Share this story. Talk about it. Ask questions. Because justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It starts with people who refuse to look away. And if you're one of them, we're just getting started.